Chapter 14 of our text deals with fallacies in reasoning. The word fallacy stems from the Latin, which means to deceive. And so fallacies reflect a poor thought process, a way of thinking and reaching a conclusion that is vulnerable and based on weak premises or assumptions. There are a couple of fallacies in inductive reasoning. That's the first category. And a fallacy in inductive reasoning reflects the idea that you're reaching a conclusion based on too few cases. So, for example, if you go back and rethink what inductive reasoning is, if you stack up a sufficient number of examples of something that happens, somebody smokes 2 packs of cigarettes a day and has lung cancer. Another person smokes 2 packs of cigarettes a day. He has lung cancer, a third, a fourth, a fifth. Maybe you have 200 cases and they all have contracted lung cancer. Then you may make a generalization based on 200 cases. But if you only had one case and tried to generalize from one person smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day that smoking causes lung cancer, it's a hasty generalization. The other example the text uses is the one the other day I saw Leo jogging in the park. That guy must be a real fitness freak. You can't make a generalization from one instance. The second example is the fallacy of composition. And this also involves how we move from the specific to the general. In this way of thinking, we falsely assume that what is true of each individual part is true of the whole when we put the parts together. And so the example the text uses is, if Jeremy stands up in the football game, he can see better. Therefore, if everybody stands up, they can all see better. So we do know that the whole is not necessarily the sum of its parts. We move on now to fallacies in deductive reasoning. And the first one is the fallacy of division. And this is essentially the opposite of what we've seen in the fallacy of composition. In the fallacy of division, we falsely assume that what's true of the whole is true of each individual part. A good example here is, what a huge hotel. And therefore you deduce the rooms must be enormous. What's true of the whole, of course, is not true of each individual part. The second example in fallacies in deductive reasoning is the false dilemma. This is also referred to as the sucker's choice, and this involves presenting two alternatives, an either-or situation, in a way that's inappropriate or misleading. Very often there are more than two choices, and so what you offer is you either do this or you do that. It's kind of binary thinking. It's either 1 or a 0. And of course, we know that most of life offers a range of different options. The example here is America, love it or leave it. And of course, there's some other options that you can take. The next example is the fallacy of, fallacies in causal reasoning. And this example is, because something happens after something else, it doesn't mean that the first thing caused the second thing. So if B follows A, then B, then you assume that B was caused by A, but that's not necessarily the case. The example the text uses is, shortly after Gertrude, or Gertie for short, started dating Chad, she developed an ulcer. That man is going to be the death of her yet. We don't know if there is a causal relationship between Gertrude dating Chad and developing ulcer, or just a casual relationship that it's coincidental, we might say. So that is the fallacy in causal reasoning. There's certain fallacies that involve the burden of proof. And this first one is and it's a Latin expression, so please forgive it, argumentum ad ignorantium. And this burden is ignored in one of two ways. You either assume something is true because it has not been proven false, or you assume that something is false because it has not been proven true. And of course, there's no burden of proof here. You can't really prove it. An argument from silence really does not work. The next example is begging the question. And in begging the question, you really don't prove anything. So all you do basically is to repeat or reassert what you've said in the first half of the sentence in a different way in the second half of the sentence. So the example the text uses is this one. American products are superior to Japanese products because they are comparatively better. Or skydiving is dangerous because it's unsafe. You just, again, repeating what you've said in the first half, and there really is not any proof. Other fallacies include non sequitur, and that is, it does not follow. You probably know this particular fallacy from English. The example here is that the public schools just aren't doing their job anymore. No wonder our kids are all strung out on drugs. The second part doesn't follow from the first. You can't connect the two. That is the example of non sequitur. The next one is the argumentum ad hominem. And this is where you attack the person. Instead of attacking the argument, and if you can't unravel the argument or disprove the argument, you figure it might be easier to just attack the person. So the example the text uses is, don't put any stock in her views on deficit spending. She spent several years visiting a psychiatrist. Now, there might not be any validity in the fact that she spent several years visiting a psychiatrist. That did not impair her thinking. Her views on deficit spending may still be just as good as it has ever been. So there might not be any relationship. And yet at the same time, there are times in which accusations against the person does not constitute a fallacy, especially if the characteristics under attack are relevant to the argument itself. So you have to figure out, is it relevant or is it not relevant? Most of the time when you attack the person, it usually is irrelevant to the argument itself. Argumentum ad populum. This is kind of the bandwagon idea. And that is, everyone else is doing it, so you might as well do it. Everybody, so teenagers like to use this one with their moms and dads. Everyone at school has a cell phone, and therefore I need one. Because everybody else is the argument from the majority. The majority is not always right. Another fallacy is the argumentum ad verecundium. And this is an inappropriate appeal to tradition. Tradition is great and wonderful, but it's not necessarily a source of knowledge or a source of authority. So someone might say it's better to wash dishes by hand than by washing them in a dishwasher, because that's what we've been doing. We've been washing dishes forever. Another variation on this argument is an inappropriate appeal to authority. Just because somebody is authoritative or a celebrity and they say something, it doesn't make it true. The example the text uses is Leonardo DiCaprio, says that Dell computers are the best on the market. Well, I'm going to buy a Dell computer then. The argumentum ad misericordiam fallacy is an inappropriate appeal to pity. That is, we should feel, the example the text uses, we should vote for Smith because his wife died just a few weeks ago, and so he needs to know that we care. Well, you shouldn't vote for somebody just out of pity. You should vote for them because they are the most competent person to do the job. The argumentum ad baculum fallacy is an inappropriate appeal to force or the threat of the force. If you don't do this, I will do this. And of course, if as Vladimir Putin said to the Ukrainians, if you don't abstain from joining the European Union or NATO, I will attack you. Of course, that's an argument, inappropriate argument or appeal to force or the threat of force. The argumentum ad criminum. This is where the arguer falsely assumes that there's a direct positive relationship between cost and quality. Just because something costs more doesn't necessarily mean that it is of a better quality. It might be, and sometimes it is, and usually it might, okay? But it's not necessarily the case. So my son went to Duke University. Duke University is twice that of NC State. Therefore, Duke University's education is better. In fact, it's probably twice as good. Of course, you can see the misleading assumptions that are involved there. The argumentum ad lazarum assumes that something is of better value because it costs less. Of course, this is the opposite of what we've just seen, and of course, that's not necessarily the case. The reductio ad absurdum fallacy involves taking an opponent's idea to an extreme, absurd level that's very inappropriate and misleading. So the example here is, well, if you oppose the 19-year-old drinking age because young people cause accidents, well, why not raise the drinking age to 65? Then we'd really cut down on highway deaths. Of course, that's taking it to an absurd level. The straw man argument is when argument caricatures or misrepresents the opposing viewpoint, making it easier to demolish it, to debunk it. So in that misrepresentation, the person thinks that they have a better argument because they're able to demolish it. And of course, a straw man argument doesn't really work because you're caricaturing or misrepresenting the opponent's point of view. Equivocation involves you using the same word or term in two different ways so as to mislead. The word equivocate means to speak out of both sides of your mouth. The example the text uses here is, doctors say you should avoid stimulants, so you better avoid that argumentation course, which some people say is very stimulating. Okay, we'll stop there and pick up the next set of fallacies in the next video.